In case you've been sleeping under a rock the past 3 decades, video games are among the most widespread forms of media, with hundreds, maybe thousands of studios, high-budget games with profits that count up to millions, reporters, reviewers, actors, the list goes on. It is a line of business, a massive one. But what do you think makes it unique? Storytelling? You can watch movies, shows, anime, or even read a book. Soundtracks? You can listen to music with no context. Writing? Again, read a book. The one thing that video games offer that nothing else does is very obviously gameplay. Pong's story and soundtrack are disappointing, said no one. Ever. Pong, the first video game ever, was all about fun gameplay and nothing else. Later came in memorable soundtracks that later turned nostalgic, with games like Super Mario Bros. And The Legend of Zelda. And even later storytelling too joined the party with games like Metal Gear Solid and Deus Ex, featuring plot twists and exposing conspiracies. The three of them evolved together to form what gaming is like today, with gameplay at its core. So it must be safe to say that a game with bad or mediocre gameplay is a bad game, right? Aren't games meant to be, played? Well, of course, but you see these two can and have carried games mostly on their own. As a matter of fact, they might have evolved into a whole genre of their own. Let me explain myself before you click off the video. Let's take a game like the Stanley Parable as an example. What do you do in Stanley Parable? I mean as gameplay, what do you do? Believe it or not, you've already seen everything your character is capable of doing in these few seconds of gameplay I have shown. Walk. How would you describe such gameplay? Boring? Lazy? Incomplete? Very well. Explain this. And guess what? It is not just Stanley Parable. Each and every one of these games' gameplay is walking. Some add vaulting over logs, some jetpack, some in third-person view, some in first, but in the end what you do is the same. Walk. Why are such games so critically acclaimed? And more importantly, how do they manage to be fun? Because they are. The answer to this question is very simple. These games are smart. They offer something no other game, book, or show offers. Let's talk about the Stanley Parable first because it's by far the simplest. No fancy visuals or setting, no climbing, no jetpacks, just 100% walking and occasionally interacting with select objects. If I tell you there's a game where there's a narrator narrating your every step right before you take it, and you have the option to either play along or do something entirely different, but the catch is the narrator is watching you, reacting to your every move.
When Stanley came to a set of 2 open doors, he entered the door on his left. This was not the correct way to the meeting room, and Stanley knew it perfectly well.
Sometimes directly talking to you.
We'll just restart the game from the beginning. And this time, suppose we don't wander so far off track,
Or even getting angry at you for doing everything against his will.
How could you have done this to us? And after we trusted you, after everything we've been through, well, I can't take this anymore, to hell with it.
Or possibly forgive you if you start by disobeying and then change your ways and start doing exactly what he says, which certainly changes the outcome.
Eager to get back to business, Stanley took the first open door on his left.
Wouldn't you at least want to try it for the sake of curiosity? Once you start, it's guaranteed that within 10 minutes you will start challenging the game to see whether the developers thought you would actually do this, only to catch yourself smiling to find out that the developers thought of that earlier, especially when you're used to playing other video games that turn a blind eye to things you do by heart, which a game like the Stanley Parable paid very close attention to. While recording some Stanley Parable gameplay for you, the game started by asking me what the time was. So the first time I run the game, I entered the time correctly. It was exactly 6:57 p.m. Then in another session, the game asked me for the time once more, and I thought something was wrong and I didn't really bother to check the time or anything, so I just pressed continue without changing anything. And this happened. So yeah, this is a small example of how smart the Stanley Parable is. You may like it, you may not, but you can never deny the fact that such experience is new and exclusive to the Stanley Parable. And if you're being objective, you can understand the appeal even if you don't really dig it yourself. Okay, so that's the case with the Stanley Parable, but surely not all these games rely on an interactive narrator, so you probably still need further justification. Let's talk Outer Wilds. Welp, I already did in a previous video, so be sure to check it out. Okay, let's not talk Outer Wilds and let's talk What Remains of Edith Finch.
A lot of this isn't going to make sense to you, and I'm sorry about that. I'm just going to start at the beginning, with the house.
Any special tricks with the narrator here? Nope, not much. Just a classic old school first-person narrator where the protagonist narrates their own story. Then the game must be taking place in a unique setting, right? Wrong. Again, the game from start to finish takes place in a house. Not even a haunted one, just a big house. As usual, I will try my best not to spoil anything to keep the experience fresh for you. The big house is the house the protagonist grew up in. It was a big family, and let's just say she hadn't seen any of them since she moved away years ago, so she decides to return as a teenager to find out what has become of them. Thing is, although the house is mostly normal, besides the fact that it's exceedingly spacious, which is pretty unusual but still very possible given how many people lived there, you do have this feeling of unease while exploring it. Even your character lets you know she feels the same way.
As a child, the house made me uncomfortable in a way I couldn't put into words. Now, as a 17-year-old, I knew exactly what those words were. I was afraid of the house.
Still no spoilers, this is the very first minute of the game. Chill. But strangely enough, this is not a horror game. There's not a single jump scare throughout the story, nor chairs moving around on their own or doors getting locked behind your back, nor any paranormal entity following you around. So what generates such feeling of discomfort? That is up to you to find out, my friend. However, I do recommend finishing What Remains of Edith Finch in a single session. It's just over 2 hours, so just treat it like a movie. I still think you might not be 100% convinced, so let's give it another shot with Firewatch. You know these people whose job are to remain on watch in forests? I had to check the job title as I wasn't exactly sure, and it turned out to be a forest ranger, I guess. And well, that's more or less what you are in Firewatch.
So what's wrong with you?
Excuse me?
People take this job to get away from something. So what's wrong?
And guess what you do? Walk around the forest. Any catch? Well, of course there is. So let's be honest, after all, this is a video game, not an actual job. Which means obviously something interesting would happen. But that's not what I'm here to talk about. That's not what makes Firewatch a good game. What I want to shed some light on is the fact that while walking around, you talk to the woman you report to, Delilah, through your walkie-talkie. And surprisingly, you will start caring about a character you have never even seen. It starts with some work-oriented conversations reporting beer cans you'd cleaned or such, getting friendlier and friendlier until you gradually find yourself getting attached to a character you have never even met.
There should be one in the supply box on the way. The code is 1234. It's actually that for all of them.
Secure.
Shut up.
Sometimes you're happy to talk to her, sometimes you're mad at her. And I'm talking about you, the player, not Henry, the protagonist. You will start learning personal details about her and sharing some of yours as well. You will feel motivated when she encourages you, and you will feel disappointed when you don't get the reaction you'd anticipated from her. It's generally a very well written story, a personal one, that's very realistic and believable. And although people are split up over the ending, I find it hard to deny that the developers tried something new with this one. Personally, when I first played it a few years ago, I found the finale a bit disappointing. It felt like the game was building something up, and then suddenly the credits rolled without getting to the climax you've been hyped for. However, in my second run, which I played very recently, I understood what they were trying to pull off. They decided to go for an ending that would happen in real life other than a climactic/dramatic one. This ideology sort of reminded me of L.A. Noire. When someone important dies, they don't usually get the chance to have that long final monologue as a goodbye. Instead, they just go. which is less common and to many people not suitable for dramatic storytelling, but still, this resembles what would happen in real life in a far more believable way. So yeah, after my second run, I appreciated the ending. They were not trying to pull something off and failed, like The Last of Us 2 trying to make you like Abby, but instead they went for an unconventional conclusion that's well executed at the risk of not being appreciated by the player.
Okay, you've killed 3 husbands. You're a black widow and you're just out here until the heat dies down and then you'll kill again.
Ooh, very good. Bravo, Henry.
I know I focus primarily on walking simulators in this video, and I really hate calling them walking simulators, but it's worth pointing out that this rule applies for most game types, as long as the gameplay is at least acceptable. I mean, I always hated turn-based combat, and Undertale is among my favorite games of all time, but let's leave that for later. And as for the rest of the games I mentioned, I'm going to get to them in another video, but let's leave it at that for today. Before you go, be sure to hit that subscribe button. If you want to recommend any games to be featured on this channel, leave me a comment. Thank you for sticking around till the end. Adios!